Medved breaks silence after Wagner Group rebellion is grinning. Prigozhin given hero's welcome as he faces exile. Vladimir Putin has finally broken his silence after the Wagner rebellion, but only stated his top priority remains his brutal war in Ukraine. As Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin allegedly heads for his exile in Belarus, Putin trumpeted that he is confident in realizing all his plans in the special military operation. Vlad stated on Russian state television today, "We feel confident, and, of course, we are in a position to implement all the plans and tasks ahead of us. This also applies to the country's defense, it applies to the special military operation, it applies to the economy as a whole and its individual areas." The leader gave the stern impression of business as usual as he affirmed that the planned meeting of Russia's Security Council will take place next week. He did not mention the extraordinary attempted coup of Saturday, which Putin previously claimed put Russia's very existence at threat. It then emerged that the interview appeared to have been pre-recorded days ago and always scheduled to air on Sunday, adding to the mystery of where is Vlad now? Putin's location is not currently known after reports of both his presidential planes fleeing Moscow yesterday. The Kremlin claimed he was staying put in the capital, however both planes were last tracked heading towards St. Petersburg. Meanwhile, Prigozhin was pictured grinning and taking selfies with fans as he was apparently forced into exile. The 62-year-old did not look anything like a man who had been defeated as he returned to his wannabe coup's base of operations in Rostov-on-Don, Russia. Wagner pulled out of Rostov on Sunday, with residents treating the cutthroat troops like heroes while chanting Wagner. Wagner. In the meantime, Prigozhin left the city for Belarus seemingly on orders of the Kremlin for his exile. The bloodthirsty mercenary boss Prigozhin appeared more like a rock star as he was ferried through the streets in the back of a black 4x4 and he took selfies with locals. One man even reached in and shook his hand, sparking a big snarling smile from the warlord once known as Putin's chef. Other residents posed for pictures with Wagner Group tanks emblazoned with red Z symbols as the military force loaded up. And they were seen applauding as the mercenary company's mini-parade through the streets of the city they seized just hours before. As police units arrived in Rostov after Wagner troops departed, locals were seen chanting "shame" and "traitors" at them. Prigozhin staged the largest threat to Putin's rule in decades when he launched an open rebellion and sent his 25,000 men marching on Moscow. It looked as if the Russian regime's life expectancy could be measured in just hours as a convoy of trucks and military gear got within 120 miles of the Kremlin. Speaking on CBS News, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Russia's crisis involving an attempted mercenary revolt against the Kremlin exposed real cracks in Putin's authority. He said the rebellion by the Wagner Group and its leader Prigozhin over the weekend marked a direct challenge to Putin's authority. So this raises profound questions, it shows real cracks. Putin suffered his worst daily Air Force losses in the war as rebel Wagner fighters repeatedly hit his strike helicopters and a high-flying military plane suspected to be carrying a top general. The losses include the death of some of Russia's leading Air Force crew members. It is believed Putin lost up to 39 pilots and crew in a few hours. And then just as suddenly as the rebellion began, it ended, and Prigozhin claimed he was retreating to Belarus. Russia insisted they had dropped all criminal charges against him, and he and his men were free to leave. The details of the deal remain unclear, and observers have warned this crisis is far from over. A number of questions remain unanswered, including whether Prigozhin would be joined in exile by any of Wagner's troops and what role, if any, he might have in Minsk. The deal also raises questions about Putin's grip on power, going from blasting Prigozhin for treason to then letting him go in an astonishing show of weakness. Former CNN Moscow bureau chief Jean Doherty said the Russian leader will not forgive his former pal and added the Wagner boss might be killed in Belarus. She said, "Putin doesn't forgive traitors. Even if Putin says, 'Prigozhin, you go to Belarus,' he is still a traitor and I think Putin will never forgive that." She added that it was possible that Prigozhin would be killed in Belarus, because as long as Prigozhin has some type of support, he is a threat, regardless of where he is. But one thing is for sure, Prigozhin does not look like a man who has been beaten. An anti-terrorist operation regime remains in place in Moscow on Sunday, with enhanced security and curbs on residents' freedoms. Tensions remain high across Russia after the attempted coup. Following his celebratory parade, Prigozhin's whereabouts remain unknown on Sunday after he was last seen in Rostov-on-Don. The billionaire runs the Wagner Group mercenary company and was once a close ally of Putin until they fell out over the war in Ukraine. He rose to power through the ranks in the Kremlin, originally being a caterer who supplied food for the military and who served Putin and other world leaders at state banquets. His favor with Vlad saw him essentially run Putin's private army, the Wagner Group. But their relationship has soured in the last 17 months since the invasion of Ukraine. Prigozhin had vowed to punish Russia after he blamed the Kremlin for a deadly missile attack on one of his training camps in the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. The warlord, a former pal of Putin's, said he was ready to oust Russia's military leaders as he turned on the top brass in Moscow. On Saturday morning, Putin raged, "This is treason," in an astonishing early morning TV address to the nation which showed he wasn't backing down. Within hours of a 400-vehicle convoy rolling onto Russian soil from Ukraine, Wagner troops seized control of Russia's regional military HQ in Rostov-on-Don. They rode heavy military machinery, tanks, and trucks. Prigozhin bragged his men believed to be better equipped than the Russian army did not need to fire a single shot as they took control of the HQ. He said, "The border guards greeted us and hugged our fighters. If anyone gets in our way, we will destroy everything. We are going all the way." Moscow looked like it was preparing for battle, with temporary roadblocks and machine gun nests set up. But then in an astonishing turnaround with his forces some 120 miles from Moscow, Prigozhin claimed he was ready to back down. In an audio message to his troops, he ordered them to return to their bases to avoid bloodshed. "We're turning around our convoys and going in the opposite direction," he said in a voice message published by his Concord firm. Putin's pal Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko claimed he had brokered a deal with the Wagner Group. The terms of the deal appeared to be confirmed by the Kremlin after the announcement that Prigozhin would leave for Belarus and would not face charges over the attempted coup. While the details of the deal remain unclear, it's understood that it was decided some Wagner fighters will be absorbed into the Russian military. Fighters who took part alongside him would not be prosecuted, while Wagner troops who did not march would sign contracts with the defense ministry, it said. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said a deal was struck, avoiding bloodshed, internal confrontation, and clashes with unpredictable results was the highest goal. He described the drama as fairly difficult and full of tragic events. It is unclear if Prigozhin's demands were met after he asked for the defense minister Sergei Shoigu and chief of the general staff Valery Gerasimov to be fired. Videos showed forces in Rostov cheering after the apparent de-escalation while residents shouted support for the mercenary group. It could now prove to be a difficult few days for Putin as he desperately tries to cling to power and save his strongman image. Defense Select Committee Chair Tobias Elwood MP told The Sun on Sunday, "In his 23 years in power, Putin has never been challenged like this. When Kremlin politics turn, it happens very quickly." Experts also feared this may not be the end of the rebellion after a dramatic 24 hours for the Kremlin. Putin's number one enemy, Bill Browder, told The Sun he did not believe the peace deal was legitimate. "This is just the beginning," he warned. Speaking to the BBC, Russia's former Prime Minister Mikhail Kazhdanov agreed that Putin is in a fragile position, saying it's the beginning of the end. "He's in very big trouble right now." Asked where does he think Prigozhin will go, he said, "I think first he will go to Belarus, but I think he will go from Belarus to Africa and be somewhere in the jungle or something like that. Mr. Putin cannot forgive him for this. Prigozhin," he says, "has destroyed Putin's stability, and his life will be under a big question as a result. For Putin," says Kazhdanov, "this is the beginning of the end. He's in very big trouble right now." Russia has since claimed that at least 15 were killed during the mutiny, while a number of helicopters were shot down. The Kremlin insisted Putin was still working in Moscow. But Leonid Nevzlin, a longtime foe, claimed he'd fled to his country residence with associates. Nevzlin said, "The dictator is in a panic. In his telegram address, President Zelensky said he was sure the tyrant was no longer in Moscow. He said, "The man from the Kremlin is obviously very afraid and probably hiding somewhere, not showing himself." In the meantime, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko flew to Beijing for talks with China's Foreign Minister Qin Genghan on international issues. It is unclear whether the visit to China, a key ally of Russia, was in response to the rebellion by mercenaries. Meanwhile, former Chief of the UK General Staff Lord Dannatt warned that if Wagner troops follow Prigozhin, it could mean a fresh attack on Kiev from Belarus. He told Sky News, "The fact that he's gone to Belarus is I think a matter of some concern. What we don't know, what we will discover in the next hours and days is how many of his fighters have actually gone with him. If he has gone to Belarus and has kept an effective fighting force around him, he then presents a threat again to the Ukrainian flank closest to Kiev, which is where all this began on February 24 last year. Although it would appear that this matter is closed, I think it is far from closed and the aftershocks will reverberate for quite some time." While infighting ensued in Moscow, Ukraine said it was able to advance along its eastern front and make gains near Bakhmut, an area previously occupied by Wagner forces. Bill Browder, a former financier who worked in Russia and has since been taking on Putin, told The Sun he didn't believe the crisis was over. "There's no way to de-escalate because Putin can't forgive somebody who has disrespected him in such a powerful way. Putin already tried to kill Prigozhin, and he understands they'll probably try it again. I think nobody trusts anyone there now. Let's just say that if this thing does de-escalate, there's gonna be a massive purge of the Kremlin like we've never seen before. Putin is going to go after everybody he distrusts in every possible way, and it's going to be a total disaster for all people inside the establishment as Putin tests their loyalty, because this is the scariest thing that has ever happened to Putin. They've emptied out the prisons, and now they're going to fill them up with perceived enemies of the regime." Colonel Hamish de Breton Gordon previously told The Sun that he thought warlord Yevgeny Prigozhin could march on Moscow in a Roman-style rebellion. His chilling prediction now seemed to be coming true yesterday. "The next 24 to 48 hours will be crucial. We could well see the implosion of Putin," said the retired colonel today. "It is sort of like Caesar being stabbed in the back by those he thought were fighting for him." And he added there is a risk of nuclear Armageddon if Russia starts to fall to pieces and descend into chaos. Western leaders, particularly the UK and US, can sit back and watch the Russians defeat themselves, but we must make sure that there is no chance that nuclear escalation. "Russia's elites are now like scorpions trying to kill each other," said the British Army officer, adding Putin is likely on the phone to Tehran or North Korea. Anton Gerashenko, a former Ukrainian interior minister, said Ukraine was now a few steps closer to complete victory over Russia. Political analyst Konstantin Kolashev noted that Russian leaders would be concerned by the sight of civilian onlookers applauding Wagner units in Rostov. He said, "Putin's position is weakened. Putin underestimated Prigozhin, just as he underestimated Zelensky before that. He could have stopped this with a phone call to Prigozhin, but he did not." The Institute for the Study of War, a Washington-based think tank, said Lukashenko's direct role in negotiating the truce would be humiliating to Putin. It said, "The Kremlin now faces a deeply unstable equilibrium. The Lukashenko negotiated deal is a short-term fix, not a long-term solution, and Prigozhin's rebellion exposed severe weaknesses in the Kremlin and Russian MOD.